I had a letter from a farmer constituent of mine up in the northern part of South Dakota the other day, in which he said that even the, and I'm quoting now, even the biggest liar in South Dakota cannot afford to sell wheat for $1.25 a bushel. Well, the truth of the matter is the biggest liar in South Dakota or in any other state shouldn't be asked to produce and sell wheat overseas or anywhere else at $1.25 a bushel, nor should any producer. And I think it's time to resume the drive for full parity on all of these commodities that are so urgently needed. We've got to begin as policymakers, as members of the Congress, as members of this great farm organization that does so much to shape federal policy, to begin thinking about acquiring food for these distribution programs in the market as the need arises, and to begin thinking about that as a process in which we expect to pay a fair price for these commodities that are going into the war on hunger. We should not wait to acquire them until excess supplies have driven the prices down to these bare minimum price support levels. We should pay the farmer for food at a fair price. And beyond this, I believe that we've got to establish new minimum prices, push those prices back up to the 90% of parity level at the very least, so that farmers can produce urgently needed food without having to depend on a kind of a hit or miss government purchase program in order to secure a decent return on the things they have to sell. And this conviction was the reasoning behind my introduction on the opening day of this Congress of a bill to provide a 65-cent export certificate on 35% of the wheat crop. Now, I'm frank to say that a number of my colleagues were amused by that effort, but I don't see anything amusing about it. I think that this is a perfectly valid and perfectly reasonable proposal, and one that we ought to set out seriously to realize in the form of law before this Congress adjourns. And that same proposal, had a section which would have kept the feed grain price in line with the proposed increases in wheat by providing for at least 90% price supports on our feed grains. Now there's a third new circumstance and final reality which must be accounted for in our farm policies, and this is one of attitude. It is the bold course which President Johnson is seeking to pursue in dealing with the problems of the nation's cities. And the more I look at these enormous problems in the cities of this country, we don't have great cities out in my state. We have great cities, but not large cities. But the more I look at the enormous problems of these great metropolitan areas around over the country, and then move from that out into the rural areas, the more I see how these two problems intertwine. How you cannot any longer, if you ever could, separate the problems of the cities from the problems of rural America. And the President made a speech that deserved a lot more attention than it got at Dallastown, Pennsylvania last year, in which he had this to say: "Not just sentiment demands that we do more to help our farms and rural communities. I think the welfare of this nation demands it, and strange as it may seem," said the President, "I think the future of the cities of America demand it too." Now, Secretary of Agriculture Freeman took up that theme and amplified it at a conference in Virginia a little bit later on, and this is what he had to say: a continued unplanned stacking up of more people in urban areas at the expense of rural areas is a national drift that bodes ill for the future. It is not too much to call such a drift national idiocy, and it does no good to offer palliatives and pills to cure a disease which has literally assumed epidemic proportions. And I say amen to that statement, because the steady drift of rural people, the loss of our young people, of our boys and girls, and these young men who can't find a decent opportunity in agriculture, the steady exodus of those people into the cities is aggravating both problems. It's adding to the congestion, the strain on the transportation, the housing, the recreational resources of the city, the pollution problems of the city, at the very same time that it's draining off the most dynamic resources of the rural areas, which is the young people, the young minds, the strong backs, the imaginative spirits that we need so desperately to maintain a dynamic rural America. So city dwellers have a crucial stake in the economic and social health of the family farm. And I think we need some advanced thinking on what kind of farm system will best reverse what the Secretary of Agriculture has referred to as the unplanned stacking up of more people in urban areas. I reject the notion that's now advanced by some economists that if a farmer is not receiving a gross income of $10,000 a year or more at today's sub-parity prices, that there's something wrong with him and he ought to get out of agriculture, because around 2/3 of all of our farmers fall into that category. They are under $10,000 a year, and in most cases it's not their fault. Some could consolidate into what has been termed adequately sized farm units, and some of them are doing that, but the rest of them, under this kind of callous policy of just kicking people off the land arbitrarily, would simply be added to the already serious problems that face us in our urban areas. Now, we're told that farm programs are not welfare programs, and I agree with that. And I have always resented the implication that the farmer who benefits from a price support system that benefits the whole nation is somehow on a dole. I was the author of a parity of income bill in the 1950s, but that bill made it clear that parity of income is not to be achieved by reducing the number of farms, but by rather increasing farm commodity prices to a level that would give the average farmer an opportunity to make a decent living on the land. My farm program can be stated very simply, and with this I'm going to conclude my remarks. It has simply two broad points to it. The first of those is to use our capacity to grow food, to recognize that Providence has blessed this country beyond any other country in the history of mankind with the capacity to grow food and with the energetic farmers to produce that food. And that's an asset that we ought to use to its fullest. The war against hunger is a war where there are no children orphaned by the weapons of that war, where there are no villages bombed, where there are no rice crops destroyed, where no American young soldiers and brave men are killed. Rather, it is a war to replace that kind of devastation and hunger and misery and death with health and with hope and with peace. And that is the kind of a war that I think this country really wants to fight. I'm convinced, as much as I can be of anything about the American people, that it's the only kind of a war that we really want to fight. It's a war It's a war that, if we fight well, will bring the gratitude of all the people around the world and the blessings of the Father of us all. The second point about my farm program is equally simple. It's simply to call for fair and profitable prices for the people that are participating in this war on hunger. This is the way, that's the way to build a stable family farm agriculture, and that has always been one of the chief foundation stones in the entire structure of America. So I look forward to working with you, the members of the National Farmers Union, to achieve these important and extremely challenging goals. May God bless us all in that very high task. Thank you very much.
Thank you, our good friend, George McGovern. He started his day 1 hour earlier than we did, and he still hasn't had dinner. George, when I rode with you from Washington to Chicago 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we were discussing your schedule, I'll always remember that you said, "Tony, I don't know how we're going to do it, but I will come." And he was here. I appreciate it very much. My dear friends, it's been a long and trying day, and I want you to know that I appreciate your great patience with me and the great courtesies that you've extended to all of us to get the business of this convention behind us. If you'll bear with me about 6 more minutes, we're going to be adjourning this great convention. Just a few announcements first. The Iowa bus will leave at 7 a.m. Thursday. Pickup will be at both the Black and Sheriff